Hello, guys. I hope everyone's doing okay. Good job on assignment 7. You guys are doing a good job. I received all your assignments. There were a few questions, but nothing major. So I would like to cover one question that um, was brought up to me a couple of times from different students. And the question was that there was an issue with the extrude curve command um, after you did the section, after you had your profile, when you were doing your rafters. And even though you tried to extrude it, it didn't work. So let me show you what I mean. Um, as you guys can see, here is the file that had the issue. I'm going to turn off the surface so you guys can see why or where this issue is. You can see that this object here is not um, extruding and is not being a solid. So I'm going to delete that and I'm going to replicate that issue. So I'm just going to put it to the side. Um, and then when I do extrude curve, I would select this object and I would give it a thickness of 2. But before I do that, I just want to bring attention to these sub options here. Notice that the direction it's going to be driven by Rhino because of the curvature. Both sides we don't need because we're only extruding to one. We do need a solid, yes, and it's up to you if you want to delete the input or not. I myself don't delete it. I just put it in layers and turn it off and on, and I go back to it if I need to. Two boundary is not necessary because we're following the same direction. And set base point, it already has a base point, which is this point. We can move it to another place if we need to, but that's fine. So I'm just going to give it a 2-inch um, thickness. And notice that even though my sub option said make this a solid, is still an open um, object in here. And the reason why that's happening is because I'm gonna do a couple times. It's because this curve is open, and it's open on an area, and that opening it's really tiny. We can't see it, and usually that happens because when you're doing a section, you didn't go all the way through the object, and as a result, the section is open. Now, there's a few ways to go about this. You can use first you can find the opening, and to do that, there's a command called curve start. So CRV for curve and then start. And what that's going to do is going to prompt you to select the curve that you want this command to show a point on the start of the curve. As you can see, we have a point here. Now, once that's done, it's telling us where the opening is pretty much. If we zoom in really close, we're going to be able to see it. I'm going to do a zoom selected. You can see that I selected the point and then I did a zoom selected just to zoom in as much as we could. There's the point right there and there's the opening right there. So the reason why this extrude curve was failing is because the curve was open. Now, to fix that, once we know what's the issue, we can run another command that is called close curve. And what that's going to do is just going to add a straight line between the beginning of the curve and then the end of the curve. So pretty much it's going to add a straight line on that opening. So I'm just going to click select my object and then hit enter. And as you can see here on my command prompt, it says that one curve close by adding a line segment, which is what I just explained. Now, if I run the command extrude curve and I give it a thickness of 2, now we get a solid here. So that's the issue. Just the curve was open in here. Now, I would recommend not to use the close command, and that's just because now in this area, it's going to be straight and it's not going to follow the curvature. I would recommend just to redo the section. So let me just delete that. Let me delete these objects in here. Bring back my surface. And then I'm going to make a section again. So I'm going to run the command again, section. Select my object. Now the issue was because we didn't pick a point that was the furthest away of the object. So I'm just going to pick a point that is somewhere here so you guys can see why that's happening. Now notice that it's a big opening there, and that's because I ended my point perpendicular to this opening somewhere here. So this is happening because we don't go beyond the object. That's why I like to, when I do these commands, I like to pick a point that is outside and then pick another point that is on the other side. That way I know for sure that my curve is going to be completely closed. As soon as I do that, I'm just going to extrude my curve to 2 inches. And now it's a solid. So that was the issue. That's why that was happening. So if it happened to you, now you know why it's happening, what are the causes, how to fix it, and how to find out where that opening is. All right, so let's jump back. Let's jump into assignment 8. Okay, so assignment 8 is going to be fairly simple. We're going to use a couple new commands, but this tutorial is going to be shorter than the last one. The reason why is because I just want to give you some time to catch up to the guys that weren't able to finish this structure because it took a long time. It was a lot of work. Good job, guys, on completing this assignment. But now for assignment 8, what we're going to do, we're going to go into creating this skin that has a specific pattern to it. And the way that is working, you can see that we have 3 panels, panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3. So these panels are the same panels, and they are being repeated and then wrapped around our current structure into these 3 segments here. So this is one big panel here. This is the intermediate panel in here. And then this is the 3rd panel right here that curves. So we're going to replicate that. You can see that I took the time to draw what the panel main geometry is going to be. So we're going to do this one together. One question that I always get the question that where is this point located? Because as you can see, all the points that we have, they're located with dimensions except this one. And the answer is this is located on the intersection of 2 lines, which happen to be this line right here and this line right here. So whenever those 2 lines intersect, that's going to be your location of your point right there. The next thing that we're going to do after we create that main geometry for the panel is we're going to give the lines some thickness, and we're going to pick some areas where we're not going to be able to see through it, which are these areas right here. And then after we have the 3D geometry of that panel, we're going to take that panel and wrap it around the structure, the rafters and the braces on those 3 specific areas that we have. So that's going to be assignment 8. So let's dive into that in Rhino, and let's figure out how to make that assignment. Okay, so let me just move this window to my other screen, and let's jump back into Rhino. So I'm picking up from my file that I worked on the previous assignment. Just letting you guys know, mine doesn't have the structure here because I've done it. I've done it on other files, but this one I haven't really done that structure just yet. But regardless, this is the same file that I was working on before. You can see it has the previous assignments. And one point that I want to make before we start this tutorial, as we start adding geometry to our file, and as we start adding more objects to our file, we're going to start adding more layers as well. So that means that our viewports are going to get a little bit messy because we're going to add more objects on top of this current area. So every time we complete an assignment, it is your job to go back into the previous assignment and then turn off the layers. And when I say turn off the layers, I mean turn off the layout layers, which we talked about on the previous session, that you would have to activate the layer and then turn off the visibility only on the current viewport that you have enabled. So that's going to keep everything clean, because at the end of the day, what I would like to have, every time you submit an assignment, I would like to see the other previous assignments, just so that I know that you guys can control the multiple objects that are within our file. So just keep that in mind. That is required to have as you're submitting new assignments. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go into my perspective view, and I am going to have, I'm going to find a place where I can develop my starting panel. So we're going to start with creating this panel right here. So I'm going to start doing that. But before I start doing that, let's check the layers just to make sure that we have the right layers. And you can see that I have up to number 2. I opened you guys' files and I noticed that you took the time to put all the layers, which is good. I don't have the layers just yet, so I'm just going to create them. And we're just going to call this tiles, which is what we have in our handout. And the one that I'm going to need right now is going to be 03.2, which is the skin. Enter, and I'm going to give it a red color. And I'm going to make this one my current. So we have that as our current. We have our perspective going on, and we need to start drawing our panel. Now, the panel that I provided is done in plan view, so I would recommend to switch your view to top, just so that you have a clear understanding of where the lines are going. You can do it in 3D if you're comfortable. I choose to do it in plan just because it saves more time when I show when I'm doing this. So let's start with our Polyline command. So I'm going to type Polyline, and this is going to be I'm going to enable my ortho. This is going to be a 50 feet by 20 feet rectangle, and then C for close, just to finish that. And we need a point at 25, which is the middle. Now, we could do a line up to 25 and then just end the line there, just so that we could snap to that, or we could just snap to the middle of it when we're doing this. So let's just do that. I'm going to do a line, pick a corner, and then go to the middle right there. The other one is going to be at 10, from the left-hand side of my rectangle. So, which is going to be the middle as well. So I'm going to do a polyline from the middle to this point right here. Okay. And this one looks like it's going to be to the middle as well. And lastly, I'm just going to add this line right here. So pretty much those lines should cover all the different variations we have from our panel. The only thing that you need to do now is make sure to follow the sketch that I provided. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm just picking the beginning of the line to the end of the line and pretty much replicate the panel that I have. And looks like we're almost done with this. We just need a few more lines. And actually this one goes all the way here. And we'll take that one out. So you should have something like this. And just to check, let's just draw some dimensions. So dim a line from this point to that point, which is 25. Total, it should be 50. That should be 10. And that should be 20. This should be 25, which is correct. And this should be 10. And it looks like we have all of it. Okay, so I'm just going to leave the dimensions there just for you guys to see them. The next thing that we need to do is to give it a thickness. And the way we do that is by offsetting the line on the two sides and then just trimming the leftover from the intersection of the two lines. So to make this easier for you guys, I'm going to select our panel line work, and I'm just going to override the display color, not the layer or anything like that, just the display color of the lines to green, something different than the actual color of my layer. And it'll make sense as I'm doing this. So we're going to run our offset command, and the distance we are going to keep it at 2, and all of our options are fine except the one that says both sides. So we're going to enable that one, and that's going to make it so that we have a thickness in there. You guys can see a thickness. Now, because I took the time to change the color of my line work, now I can tell where my intersection is when I'm doing this. So you're going to do that for all the lines, and then you're going to trim the lines. So I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to do it, and then we'll come back when it comes time to trim the lines. So I'm just going to offset all the lines. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. A few things that didn't mention is the thickness of this um, gap in here. It should be fairly bigger. I mentioned it was fine at 2, and I believe it's set at 4. So let me just do a dimension just so that you guys can see what the actual thickness um, of it. That way we're all in the same page. And I'm trying to make it perpendicular. So that's gonna be 8 inches total for the thickness of our panel um, line that we have in here. So just keep that in mind. I'll leave it there so that you guys can see it when I'm doing this. So we have the offset completed in all of our panels. So now what we need to do is trim the lines that we don't need. And to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run my trim command. And rather than picking the two that I want and then picking the one that I don't want, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select everything at once. And then I'm going to click enter. So what that's going to do is going to make everything a border and a cut um, reference. So all you need to do now is just click on the areas that you don't want so that you have the leftover of it. And I hit escape by mistake. So let me run it again. So I'm going to hit trim, select all of it, um, and then I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to pick that. Okay. And the leftover we can just delete it, and you should get a nice ending condition like this. So our goal is to have what I just did in here everywhere else here. Obviously on this intersection, what you could do when you're doing the trim um, is going to be to just um, make it a nice intersection between those two. And you can see here, this is what we're going after. So I'm going to pause the video again. I'm going to do all the trimming around this panel, and then we'll come back and extrude it and put it on the right place. Okay, so we're back, and as you can see, I offsetted all the lines. We have a nice continuous thickness between the lines in all of our intersections. So it should look something like this. Now, I'm going to bring back our packet with the different assignments. This is the one that we did. Notice how there are some areas that are not completely see-through. Those areas are going to be, if you follow my mouse, they're going to be here, here, and here. Oh, sorry, here, right here. So I'm going to put it on my other screen, and then I'm going to delete those areas, which is going to be this line here, this line there. Delete that. So now we don't have an opening right there. And also the intersection of all these guys in here. And then lastly, it's going to be this area here. So now you can see that, I'll try to make this smaller. Now you can see that these areas in here are not see-through, this area here. So now we have it just like in our um, handout. The next thing that we need to do is, I'm going to bring this back, figure out where our panels are going to be. We have the panel that we want to use, but we don't know the area that, excuse me, that we want to put it on. So we need to figure out where panel 1 is, panel 2 is, and panel 3 is. Obviously, panel 1 is going to be from the starting point of this face all the way to this line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to the fifth line here of our groundwork. And then panel 2 is going to be from that line up to the starting point of our angles here of these lines. And then panel 3 is going to be from that point all the way to the end. So let's do that. I'm going to put this on my other screen, and we have the structure here. We have the surface here. I'm going to put it in 3D so that you guys can see what's going on. So we have it in 3D, and we need to split certain areas of our surface that we have here. But before we can do that, if we split the areas from this object, we're gonna lose this object. So what I like to do, I like to put it on a new layer. So that's where your 03.1 surface guide is going to play an important factor when we're doing this. So I'm going to generate that layer. So we're going to call it 03.1 surface. Oops, there we go. Surface guide. Okay, and notice how I did it outside. So to bring an outside layer into one of your main layers that you have here, you can always click on the layer and then just click and drag, and that's going to put it in the same folder as the other layers that you have here. So that's what we want. Now that we have this surface guide, we're going to give it a color. I believe we're going to put this as cyan. And remember, the color doesn't matter. You can pick your own colors. It's just things that you haven't used. Obviously, I have the cyan already there, so let me change that. We'll do a light green. Okay, so what we need to do is copy this surface into this layer. But before we copy it, we need to only use the top of our surface. Let me turn the other ones off. So because we have a thickened surface in here. If we copy this, it's going to bring all the faces of our thickened surface. When we're working in this assignment, we're only focused on using the top surface of this object. So there's a command to only extract surfaces of objects. And as the name implies, we can just type extract surface, enter. And what that command is going to do is going to let us select a surface. Notice how it's selecting the top surface only, not the bottom or the front or back faces, only the top one, the one that we selected. And it's going to create a copy of that specific surface. Make sure that if you don't have copy, it's just going to extract it and then it's going to take it out of that object. If you have copy enabled, it's going to extract it and leave another surface in the object that it came from. So I'm just going to select my copy yes because I do want a copy. So I'm going to hit enter and I'm just going to move it so that you guys can see the result. I'll bring it back later. We have our thickened object here and then we have the extracted surface. So that's what we want. I'm going to undo one time and with the extracted surface selected, I'm just going to put it in my layer. Okay, now we have our extracted surface here and we can turn off our surface layer in here because it's nice and safe on the other surface folder. Now that we have that, we can start splitting this surface in here. You could do it in perspective, you could do it in plan, it doesn't matter. The results are the same as long as you got the right range of where the panels are. And as described before, the range is going to be from the front face all the way to the fifth line in here. So let's do that one together. So we're going to do split. And there's no split surface. Rhino splits everything, curves, lines, whatever object you have. The only command that you can use is just split. It's going to prompt you for the object to split, which is going to be our surface. We're going to hit enter once. And then we're going to pick the line that we want to use as our splitting guide, which is going to be that fifth line that we counted. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to pick that one and then we're going to hit enter. Notice that Rhino is doing the splitting, so we have one surface there, and then the rest is going to be here. So now from that line, we know that the next line is going to be the starting of our angle. So let's run the command again. So we're going to do split, select our surface, then select our line, and hit enter. So now we have our three surfaces that are going to act as our guides for our panels. I don't believe I have talked about this, but there's a way in which you could turn off these lines that you see here because you can't tell where the panels are by just looking at this. Also, the color is not working, so let me make it another color here. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so to turn those lines off, we can select the objects, and if you go into the properties, there is a option that says isocurve density. So all these lines they're isocurves, which are just lines that show you the curvature of your object. You can see that we have a density here. We can bring this back all the way to 1, I believe, or we can just uncheck this so that it doesn't show the isocurve. So now it's very clear where our panels are. We have it here, we have it here, and then we have it here. If at any point you want to bring them back, you can always click that and then they're back. It's just a view mode option that you either enable or disable. So we're going to keep it disabled. Um, okay, so once we have that, I just want to show you what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to take a object, and this object happens to be this panel in here, and we're going to take this object and wrap it around a certain surface. That certain surface is going to be one of these panels that we have in here. The way to achieve that is going to be by using a command that is called flow along SRF, surface, flow along surface. And what this command does, it lets you select the objects that are housed in that have a plane as a reference, and that plane is going to dictate how they wrap around a specific surface. So now I didn't take the time to explain what I was doing. I was just trying to show you what the command does. You could see here that in this area in here where we have this plane, I have a collection of objects in here. So what I did, I ran the command, I selected my objects, then I selected my base surface, which is going to be a base plane in this instance, and then I apply it to my target plane, which is my target surface here. And what that did, it took the objects that were in here, use my reference surface as a guideline, and then wrap it around my target surface with the objects that I had in my reference plane in here. Notice how when it did that, it deformed some of my objects in here, and that's just the nature of the command. We have some options that we can enable so that it doesn't do that. It follows the curvature, but it keeps the geometry intact. We don't want to do that because we do want to wrap it around the surface. So the option is there. We can choose to use it or not. So one important thing that I want to draw attention to is that when using this command, where you click is very important. For example, notice that I have a sphere here and I have a couple of rectangles in here. And I'm going to run my command again, flow along surface. I'm going to select the objects that I need to flow along my surface. The order in which I pick the objects does not matter. I'm going to hit enter. And we're going to talk a little bit about these sub options in here. The first one, it says copy, which is set to yes. We do want to copy the objects that we have here and copy those into our target surface, which is what we're trying to do. Rigid, this is the option that I was explaining earlier. If you have this set to no, it's going to deform your objects when it puts them on the target surface. If you have this set to yes, it's going to try to keep the object integrity at a level that is not being deformed by the software. The next one is, it just says plane. Basically what that is if you don't have a plane drawn in here, you can click this and it's going to let you draw a plane while you're in the same command. Because we have a plane already established here, we're not going to use that plane. The constrain normal, it's going to constrain the direction of these objects so that are always constrained to the direction of these objects in here. And if we enable that, they're always going to be pointing up pretty much, depending on your normal direction. We know that our direction is always going to be pointing up in this instance. The auto adjust is going to be set to yes, and that's because if we have it set to no, it's going to populate the entire is going to populate beyond our target surface, so it's going to have some objects floating around here. So we want to have it as yes. The preserve structure is going to preserve the structure of these objects. We don't really need to modify that one. We can just leave it as no. The one thing that I do want to call attention to, just like I said at the beginning, is when you click the base surface, let's say I picked my objects already and I'm ready to select my base surface. I hit escape by mistake, so let me run this again. Okay, I'm gonna pick my objects. Okay, I picked my objects, I hit enter, and now it's telling me what is the base surface that you want to use as a guideline. And the base surface is going to be this rectangle here. The thing that I want to draw attention to is where you click matters. So if this is your base surface and you click this corner, it's going to use that as a starting point when applying it to here, to this target surface. So I'm going to pick this corner right here. Now, I didn't hit enter or anything. Notice how it says pick your target surface. And we're going to pick our target surface, which is going to be this panel right here. And notice that I'm clicking this corner right here of this surface. So I'm going to click that. And notice how I have my sphere right there with my cubes that I have going on. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but this time I'm going to pick my base surface on a different corner just to see the different results. So I'm going to say flow along surface. I'm going to pick my there we go. Okay, flow along surface. I'm going to pick my objects in here. The order doesn't matter. Okay, now it's asking me for my base surface, which is this plane that we have here, but in this instance, I'm going to select this corner right here, and I'm going to pick the same corner right there. And notice that now we don't really get the sphere in here, because when we run this command, it's dependent on where you click. So if I click close to this corner, it's going to take that as the starting corner, and it's going to apply it to the corner that you pick. Now, because we picked the opposite corner, it's doing the same thing in here. So keep that in mind when you're doing this work in here. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to delete these. I just wanted to show you a quick preview about the command and what it does. And now what we need to do is extrude this, make it into a object, and then move it to this surface by using the flow along curve. So I'm going to pick all of these lines. And I should probably do this in top. I'm going to pick all those lines. Better yet, I'm going to pick everything, make a copy of that here, and just so that I don't have to deselect the lines over and over again, because there's going to be a lot of tries for you guys when you're doing this. I would suggest to make a copy and then delete the inner lines that we have here, where you have a clean geometry in there. And I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to go back into my perspective view. And I'm going to extrude this. And I'm going to give it a thickness. I'm going to say this is going to be 4-inch thick. Okay. So we're running into some issues. It's not a complete solid. I didn't check my options. We do have a solid yes, so that means we have an intersection of a few lines, and you can see it right there. That's why this is failing. So let me just trim those. Okay. Once we have that completed, select everything, extrude curve. We'll make it 4-inch. And now we have, this part is good, this part is good. We have some issues here, and that's because I didn't trim that. So let's undo one time and trim those. And I purposely didn't do those just so that I could explain what happens when you start seeing those extrusion as not solid and how to fix it. So now that I think we have everything resolved, let's extrude this curve once again. And let's make it 4 inches, and you should get something like this in here. So I'm going to move this to the right, just so that we can have some sort of history of what's going on. So we have this object here. Let's put it in the right layer, which I believe is going to be the 3.2 metal. So let's name it to that. So the 3.2 metal. And I take that back. That is going to be, we have skin and then we have metal in here. So what we're doing for this panel is going to be skin. So we are on the right layer. The metal, if you're wondering what that is, that's the next assignment that is coming. So yes, work on 3.2 skin layer only, which is the one that we have. Let me change this to that object, or I'm sorry, to that layer, which I just did. And I have that layer as my active layer, which you can tell by looking at this check mark. And let's run our flow along surface command, and let's see what we get. Select objects to flow along surface. It's this one. Hit enter. Select base surface. We don't have a base surface, so we need that. Okay, so we need to have that base surface in there. So I'm gonna hit escape, and let's generate our base surface or our plane. And we could just do a simple plane in here, but I like to be a little bit more precise when I'm doing this, because I like my base plane to be exactly the same as the surface that I'm applying it to. And a way to do that is by using a command that is called create UV curve, CRV. So create UV curve is gonna create a closed line base of any surface. Doesn't matter if it's curved or not. If it's straight, it's gonna generate a closed flattened curve that we're gonna use as our base plane. So once I hit enter, you're gonna see that I have that going in here. I think I clicked twice. Let me see why. Okay, so create UV curve. Select the surface. Hit enter, and I got 2 rectangles here. And the reason why is because this command remembers where the surface comes from. It remembers that we took a big surface and then we split it into 3 parts. That's why you're getting 2 rectangles here. If it happens to you, all you need to do is pick the smaller one of whatever you get. In this instance, mine is going to be um, this one, the one that I'm gonna need, and then the other one, it just signifies, or it just uh, it just shows the entire surface from beginning to end. So I'm gonna delete that one, and this is the one that I'm more concerned of. So I'm gonna move it to the side, and then I'm gonna put it on my skin layer. Okay, and I am going to make a plane out of this curve, and to do that, um, we only run the command that is called Planar Surface. Planar SRF, select the curve, and then hit enter, and it generates a plane out of that curve. We still have to move this object to there, so let's just move that. So move from this point to that point, and we're gonna rotate that into that. And let's run the command. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's run the flow along surface. We're going to select our panel that we want to copy it from this base surface. And then just one more time, the sub options here, we do want to copy it. We don't want it to be rigid. We're not concerned about the plane. Constrain normal, we're going to set to no. And auto adjust, we're going to set to yes. Preserve structure, we're going to set to no. And we're going to pick this curve right here. I'm sorry, we're going to pick this plane right here as our base plane. We're picking this corner, and then we're going to put it in this target surface, and let's see what we get. Depending on your computer, this might take some time. It might take a long time. If it looks like it crashed, just give it some time. It's going to come back. It all depends on your machine. Now, once we see it, you can see that we do have the effect that we're looking for, right? But it's actually going beyond the bounds of our surface in here. And that's because our panel is way bigger than our base surface that we have here. I keep calling it surface or plane. It's the same. So the panel is bigger than our base plane in here. So we need to make it smaller, or remake our panel so that it fits here. So I'm going to choose to make it smaller. And the way you can do that is by scaling it. And we're going to scale it. So we're going to say scale. And there's a command that is called scale 1D and then scale 2D. I'm going to use the one that says scale 1D. And what that's going to do is going to enable to scale the object in one direction only. So it's only going to stretch it in the Y direction right now. And then later I can run the command again and say scale 1D and then scale it into the X direction right there. And let's see what happens. So we're going to do flow along surface. Before we do that, let's delete the one that we have here. So we're going to say flow along surface. We're going to select our extrusion. We're going to hit enter. Select our base surface from that corner, and then we're going to put it in this corner right here, and you should get something like this. Now let's check our handout, and notice how we have this triangle here. If we go back here, yes, that triangle is in the right spot. So just make sure that when you're doing this, you have um, the triangles, the ones that you can't see through, on the right spot. And make sure that when you do this, um, it's actually when you're doing the flow along surface that this is on the outside of your surface and not the inside of your surface. If it's on the inside of your surface, chances are that you're picking the wrong corner. That's why it's doing that. Okay, so one more thing. There is an issue with the way that we're going to be doing this. And the reason why is because when we create our curve from our surface, there's going to be uh, a gap because our surface is not completely square and our panel is. You can see it here. Let me put it in a different color so you guys can see the difference. Um, the panel is rectangular and our surface, our base surface is not. So whenever we apply it to our target surface, there's going to be a little holes in here. Um, the panel is not going to reach all the way to the end of the surface. So what I just explained just a few moments ago, we're going to do it a little bit different just so that it works out. And the way we're going to do it is by just, once you have your panel here, rather than doing the whole control create UV curve, what you're going to do once you have this panel, you're going to create a planar surface. And the way you do it is by clicking on this button here, the surface from 3 or 4 points, or just type surface points, doesn't matter. So once you have that command, you're going to go around um, and just do a plane in here. That plane is going to be rectangular, and we're going to use that as our base rather than rotating it and trying to scale it to our UV curves that we did. We're just going to do a plane below. This should be easier for you guys because you don't have to do so many commands. And then just do the flow along surface. Select your panel. Pick the corner that you want to use. I'm going to pick this corner. And then I'm just going to apply it. And then you guys can see that it went on the inside. That means I'm on the wrong corner. So I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to say flow along surface. Select my panel. I'm going to pick the next corner. And I'm going to pick this corner. And notice how now it actually goes all the way to the panel itself. So we're going to do it that way rather than the whole create UV curve. And I'm going to do it again, flow along surface, select my panel, hit enter, select the corner I want to use, select the other corner, and it's failing again. All right, so there's some issues with our curves and our surfaces. The issue is that when you're going to be doing this assignment, when you do the flow along surface, and you pick your geometry that you want to flow along the surface. You pick the target surface, and then I'm sorry, the base surface, and then when you pick your target surface, it creates this, uh, and what this is just something that is following. If you see the lines here, these are called the isocurves. It's following the isocurves and is not following the split surfaces that we did. And the reason why is because when we use the split command, it remembers the isocurves. That's why we were getting the two curves when we did the create UV curve. So what we need to do is just regenerate this surface right here. So if you get to this point, if you follow along and then you get to this point and then you have this issue, what I would recommend is just do section, pick the split surface that we have, and then just create curves, create sections of um, only on the area that you're working on. In my case, um, it's going to be this middle part. And then after you have those sections, you can just use a command called Loft, and you pick these objects. Uh, the the order in which you pick the curves matters, so pay attention to that. Make sure that they're not flipped or anything. Sometimes you're gonna get things that are like that. If that happens, um, click this align curve and then click um, on the point so that you could see what's going on. This one you can see that it's uh, the the path that it's using is going to this curve, then it's going to this curve. Um, so it's a mess. So I'm gonna cancel this and then run it again. So Loft, and then select the path that I want to follow. And notice how that one, the one at the end, is a little bit uh, off. We're going to click Align Surface, and we're going to click that. Notice how my path now is straight. That's what we want to do. And the reason we're doing all this is so that our flow along surface works. So if we say flow along surface, select our geometry, our base surface, and then our target surface, you can see that now is adjusting to this specific um, panel that we have in here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna regenerate those areas so that we get a better result. So if you get to this point and your panels are not working, that is the reason why. So just keep an eye on that. You're probably going to have to regenerate this, the last one and the middle one. Those are the two problematic ones. So just let me know what happens. Okay, so um, that's as far as I have for you today for assignment 8. So now your task is to create the same thing that we just did and create it in a way that you can apply it to the 3 different panels that we have here. We went over how to split the 3 surfaces, so you should have no problem finding where the panels are. Um, and then as far as the panel itself, you don't have to recreate it for each panel. You don't have to do that. You can reuse the same panel that we did and then just apply it to the different target surfaces that we have in here. So your job is going to be to recreate this page, including the arrows and the text. Please make sure that you have your name. I have a lot of no names. Um, Include a page with the layout of your panel, and also include a page with the 3D of your panel in plan view only. You don't have to do anything else. And lastly, I would like to have a 3D of just the rafters and the braces and the skin and the panels that we did just now. Uh, and that's going to be it for assignment 8. After you do that, you're going to have to go back into the previous assignments and make sure that the new layers that you created for assignment 8 are not showing in your viewports. And this is part of all the assignments. Every time you submit one assignment, you have to submit all of them, a collection of all of them, just so that I can see that you are able to pretty much maintain your layers as you're doing this. Now, to give you an example, we just created a few more layers in here. If I go back into my groundwork, you're going to see that now I have my skin layer in there. So all I have to do is just double click my viewport, go into the new layer that we did. Even it could be even the the main folder layer that we have, and then just turn it off. And that's just gonna get rid of it. Um, so all you have to do is do that in all the assignments, the previous assignments that we've done. Make sure that you do it in the layout uh, visibility, which is going to be the one on the right hand side on your layers. And for this one, we do want to bring the and then same thing for all the assignments. So I hope that's really clear, and I am eager to see what you guys can do. Um, as I said before, I had a really good couple of projects that you guys submitted. So please keep up the good work, and we'll see you on the next one.